Now, I think what Ed was trying to say in his introduction there is I'm really old, which isn't very nice of you at all, Ed, but I'll accept it. And I want to take you back for a minute to, can anyone tell me, well, actually, let's see, how many F1 fans in the room? Yeah, a few? What year is this? Oh, no. Not even close, Ed. No one? Oh, man. This is a great story we can talk about over drinks later. We don't really have time for it today because apparently at a marketing conference you have to talk about marketing and not Formula One. But the year 2009, the Brawn GP team competed in and won their only World Formula One Championship. This bloke just got into the White House. The first time he got into the White House. His hair was a little less grey there. He had a few less wrinkles back then. It was Kevin 09. So we were 2 years into the reign of Kevin 07. I think we were about 6 months away from Kevin 07 being replaced with the first time he was replaced. This was our All Australians, and I particularly like this shot here because the Dick Smith logo. Anyone remember Dick Smith? Yep. It's very timely. And there was this guy. So here I am graduating from the SA Young Entrepreneur Scheme in 2009, full of vim and or vigour, I believe are the words that we use. And so 2009 was when I started running Google Ads. So I've been doing this for a little while, and anyone who's done Google Ads for about 3 weeks probably knows that it's changed a fair bit. It changed last week, it'll change next week, and it keeps you on your toes. So there are a few things that I want to share that I've gone over and I've learned over my journey that I think that you might all get some benefit from. And I'm not even sure whether there's a language warning here, but Google support still sucks. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about skipping the conversion tracking. We're going to talk about broad match keywords and how they're not actually the enemy. We're going to talk about Performance Max. Anyone actually like Performance Max? Any fans in the room? No? Oh, one, yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. Rob, thank you. And we're going to talk about running brand campaigns. So, I want to start with a very simple question though, because before we actually go through what we've learned in Google Ads, you need to remember that you look at this through the context of what you're actually trying to achieve. If you don't look at it through that context, you'll send yourself down a rabbit hole that leads you in the wrong direction. So, first thing you need to do here is understand what you're actually trying to do. Are you trying to generate leads? Cool, okay, that's fine. How do they become a lead? Do they become a lead by filling in a form? Do they make a phone call to you? Do they click on an email address on your website? Are they making orders on your website? Phone calls in general, not just leads. Are you an organisation that has apps and you look for app installs? So before we get too deep into the rest of it, it's really worth just thinking, have you actually set SMART goals for each of these? Are you open to amending your KPIs based on the feedback that you get from the platform? All right. Particularly when we come to conversion tracking, this is a really critical point to think about. Now, I really love that Limp Bizkit came back after years and decided to name their album Still Sucks. And I thought this was timely because Google support still sucks. If you've dealt with Google Ads, you'll get a phone call from them. They'll tell you to auto-apply recommendations. They'll tell you to spend more. You'll ask them a complicated question and it won't be on their script, so they'll leave you alone for the next 6 months. And then they'll come back to you and they'll go, hey, remember me? Except it won't be like that because it's a new person and they won't remember that somebody rang you 6 months ago and you'll have the whole conversation again. If you spend less than about 50-ish thousand a month, that's probably your experience. If you spend a bit more than 50, you might have a better experience. We have some clients that spend 400,000 a month and they get the same treatment. So, not the same treatment, the same similar treatment. So we need to accept that Google support sucks, okay? But why do they suck? They have different goals to you, and that's a really important thing to remember right off the bat. So they want you to spend more money. And so their whole deal here is to get you to spend more money. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for you, they want you to spend more money. Whereas you don't necessarily want to spend more money right now. You want an affordable, predictable return, and then you want to be able to ramp up your ad spend. Very few clients, if they're getting a predictable, scalable return, don't want to spend more money, because if they're spending more money, they're making more money, and they know that. The data's telling them that. The other thing you need to remember about Google Ads is most of the people that will ring you don't actually run ads. So they know what their script tells them to say. If you ask them a question that's off script, they can't really answer it. They'll tell you that they're going to check with somebody else, but they don't know everything that works. And they have KPIs around turning on auto-apply recommendations, which aren't usually in your best interest. And so when you're thinking about the calls that you have with your Google Ads rep, what you really want to do here is have somebody who knows how the system works in the real world. Critical. So, does that mean that you should dodge the calls? Probably not. I'm very fond of saying that a broken clock is right twice a day. And there are a few different things that you can do here to actually have a semi-positive relationship with your Google support rep. And the first thing is to listen and question. So listen to their recommendations. If they make sense, cool, they've spotted something that maybe you didn't, action it, brilliant, love that. If they don't make sense, ask them questions until they do. And if they can't explain it to you, they don't know what they're talking about. So make them explain it in a way that you understand, or leave it alone. And if it still doesn't make sense after you've asked them to explain it, just don't do it and move on. You'll probably waste half an hour in 3 months, which isn't the end of the world. Don't turn on auto-apply recommendations unless you 100% understand what it will do. Hey, Paul, is Google's AI automatically creating ad copy potentially a legal risk? Thank you. Yep, it's good to have a lawyer in the crowd. And we've had scenarios where Google's AI has created ad copy that's potentially at odds with defamation law in some countries. And if you're dealing with lawyers in America and Google automatically creates ad copy about lawyers in America, it's not a very fun place to be. Don't recommend. And just really consider what these recommendations are doing before you turn them on. You must understand it if you're going to turn it on. And we're going to talk about broad match keywords in a minute, but do not add or convert your keywords to broad match. That's the new thing. We're going to convert this because it's going to help you, but it's typically going to harm your results, but give you more volume, so you're going to pay Google more money for the results that you're getting. Works well for Google. So, if in doubt, don't be afraid to ask. If you're concerned about the Google support rep thinking that you don't know what you're talking about, I wouldn't worry about that. I would just ask them questions until it does. And if they're not prepared to answer your question, then just move on. Now, it'd be funny how often this comes up. And sorry to trade on your trademark material here, Paul, but we can talk about this offline. It'd be amazing the number of clients that we have coming to us with a Google Ads account that we need to review, and they just didn't set up the conversion tracking, or, no, we'll know if it's working or not. I love that. we'll know if it's working or not. Cool? But we won't. And we're the ones that are making decisions about how this money is spent. So we really want to know what is converting, what isn't, and how can we spend more money on the things that are converting and less money on the things that aren't. So you need to know what you need to track. And this is where it comes back to what were your goals in the first place. Orders, leads, phone calls. We've got a really fun one at the moment where you can track a lot more. And if you track a lot more, just make sure that they're set to secondary, so you're not seeing conversions that don't exist. But then you can go down rabbit holes like add to cart, out of stock product, starting the checkout process, finishing the checkout process, basically every step in your journey to see where the peaks and troughs are, really understand the customer journey inside Google with their attribution, and make adjustments accordingly. And I think that's the big thing here, because all of your conversion reporting attribution platforms will measure their own way. So if you've got all the data in Google and you're looking at a consistent reporting structure, you actually know what's going on a lot better than if you didn't. Now, the primary, secondary, make sure that you've actually got the right conversion set as primary. What are the things that are most important to your business, your organization? Orders, leads, donations, things like that. We have come across that accounts that are spending 50, 100 grand a month that have things like page views. We've just dealt with one where they were phone calls, and the phone calls were for a completely unrelated business, and they didn't realize. And we calculated that the client had spent $450,000 in 3 years on calls to a prison commissary phone line that had nothing to do with them. And their agency hadn't caught it, they hadn't caught it. These things happen, and this is a genuine learning because you need to make sure that these are set up properly and you know where your money's being spent. Best way to do this is to run the Google Ads Enhanced Conversion pixel. Link your Google Analytics forward to Google Ads so you can bring those events in as well, and use call tracking if that is a goal. Something like call rail is pretty essential here. And the reason I say use the Google Enhanced Conversion tag is that Google have delightfully lent me this slide, and they will be able to better track your results if you use the enhanced conversions action. Better track those results across devices, but also better track things like performance max where we're crossing networks all the time. You'll see a reasonable uplift. We see kind of 15 to 25% difference in the GA4 actions alone versus running enhanced conversions. We don't see a hell of a lot of difference between server-side enhanced conversions versus browser-based enhanced conversions or tag manager or anything like that, before somebody asks. So we want to be able to track where the conversion came from, whether it was YouTube, whether it was wherever it was. And again, know what we're spending money on and know what we're not. All right. I heard you liked AI, so I used AI to make some images about AI and keywords. And having seen Paul's presentation, I'd say this is the second most horrifying thing that will get displayed at the conference. A human broad match keyword shaking hands with Paul. It's a white guy. Look at that. What a surprise. Broad match keywords for a long time, we kind of talked about them as being the enemy. They spent all your money. They didn't give you a great result. Google changed them to try and make you use them. But, people didn't necessarily fall for that. But they aren't always the enemy if you know your levers and you know what you need to do to make the most of them. So a refresher on our match types. So Google say broad match is a keyword match type that allows your ad to show on searches that are related to the meaning of your keywords, which can include searches that don't contain the keyword terms. So this allows you to reach more searches than with exact and phrase matches. Now, I guess the issue there is that you don't necessarily want those more searches. And if we look at the keyword low carb diet plan, ads might also show for carb-free foods, which is not the same as low carb. Low carb diets, that's probably okay. Mediterranean diet books. How to cut carbs for beginners. Carb-free meals. Some of these are probably not too bad, and you want to be able to capture those, put them in as keywords, run traffic to them, and optimize accordingly, or put them in as negative terms. You may very well look at this list and go, well, actually carb-free isn't the same as low carb, so I'm going to put free in as a negative term, and I'm going to put Mediterranean in as a negative term. Cool, we learned something, we move on. It's cool. But when we look at what we call the pyramid of match types, there's a really defined structure that comes through in just about every client account. And I've pulled this out of a client account at random. And if you look at this, you'll see that the broad match keywords get the volume that Google promised. They've done a great job. They've 4.5 times the impressions of the other match types. Okay, cool. That's pretty much what we would expect. But you'll see that they've also spent 4.5 times more than the exact match keywords. The CPA is that 4.5 times? Yep. And the click-through rate is lower. Although, interestingly enough, because this is real data, the click-through rate's actually a little bit higher than phrase match in this client account. So as we look at broad match, that's going to give us the most volume, but it's going to cost us the most. Then we're going to move to phrase match, which will give us, normally, would give us less volume, less cost, but be a bit broader than exact. And then when we come to exact match, which is in itself reasonably broad these days, that will have the lowest costs. It's your most efficient keyword play here. So what we end up doing is we expect our broad match keywords to perform differently to exact match. We can't hold them to exactly the same standard here. We expect more volume, which a lot of people really need. We want to scale our ad accounts, we need volume to do that. But we also expect a lower click-through rate than exact match. We expect a lower cost per click, but we expect higher CPAs. We want to establish our negative keywords really early. Running broad match without any negative keywords is kind of just letting Google take your money. Even if you run a basic set of negative keywords, free, trial, people like to put adult terms in now as a filter, although I think broad match is smart enough to avoid that kind of thing now. Brand terms, definitely. And then you need to check your search terms reports regularly. We have clients that insist on this happening daily. I think depending on how much you're spending, you can probably get away with weekly. Add your negative terms for the terms that are unrelated to your business that Google have identified. And then look also at the ones that are performing and put them in as keywords and use them as a phrase and exact match so you can really funnel this in. And then we have a particular structure that we use that we like to use all three match types. We use the broad match as basically a catch-all funnel to be able to drive the efficiency with the phrase and the exact match. So we group our keywords by match type, and we have cross-ad group negative keywords. So what that means in a picture that I didn't use AI to create is this. We would end up having an ad group for broad match, an ad group for phrase match, and an ad group for exact match, which we spell XM because we're weird. And so in your exact match ad group, you have your exact match keyword, and that's pretty much all you do. Or your keywords. Wouldn't usually run one, but you can. In your phrase match ad group, you would have your phrase match keyword, but you would have a negative keyword in there for the exact match variation. That means that instead of the exact match term Google keyword appearing in the phrase match search terms report, it'll appear in the exact match search terms report. You with me so far? Yep. All right. Then we do the same thing with the broad match, except we negative out the exact match and the phrase match variations. So what this does is it drives the traffic into the cheapest variation of the keyword, and the broad match ad group would not contain the words Google keyword, because that'll be going to the others. Make sense? That is the most efficient way to run a Google Ads account. We've had Google reps go, no, now we do them in themes. Okay, so we do them in themes. That doesn't perform as well. Then Google go, oh no, now we just use all broad match. That doesn't work as well. This is the way that we've kind of proven is an efficient way to do it. If you can get efficiency out of your ad account, you can also then scale it and get volume out of it as well. All right, now let's talk about Performance Max. And I know this is terrible, but I've done it on purpose because the AI made it. And that is exactly the point we're making here with Performance Max. Performance Max is an AI-driven format, and that's the quality of an AI-driven comic book. It's not bad. I don't know what a monstering is. But end one thing. Apparently that dude's name's Max. But he's another white dude, Paul, so you're onto something here, I reckon. So what we've got here is we've got a relatively new AI-driven ad format. And I don't know how much longer I can use the words relatively new, considering this came out in 2020 in alpha. It's kind of like saying the new normal or the post-COVID period or whatever it is. I'm sure it'll be out of fashion pretty soon. But it's kind of similar to paid social in that it's more about targeting the audience than the keyword. And it runs ads across search, display, shopping, and more. So if you're running shopping ads, this is probably a very good option for you. And it also is replacing local search ads now. What it hasn't replaced, but it is trying to replace, is also Google Search, Google Display, and YouTube. So it wants to be all the things to all the people all the time. But the problem is if you are an experienced Google Ads person and you've been doing it for a while, it's an automated black box. You get this box that really resists giving you any kind of feedback or data. We got you some conversions, trust us. Okay, what search term was that? Trust us. What website are my ads appearing on? Did we mention you should just trust us? So you get limited levers to optimize and test. You get limited exclusion options. They have finally given us the ability to exclude brand terms, which is a great win. But you don't get to exclude certain websites. I believe they're working on that. That may be a thing. And it does work best, as I mentioned before, with enhanced conversions configured. That's going to be your best bet. Now, it's not always terrible though, so depending on your budgets, it's worth experimenting with it. A few things that we want to consider when we're testing with Performance Max. First thing is test, and then test some more, and then try different things, and go into this with a beginner's mindset, because things that don't work in search will work in Performance Max. So try different asset groups targeted at different people. If you're using shopping, then target some asset groups with segmented product. So segment out your product based on your audience targeting so that you can really get specific about who you're advertising those to. When you're testing your audiences in particular, Google will tell you that you can use custom segments, remarketing lists, interests and demographics. And then it will actually prompt you and go, well, you think you've done a good job here, you get a 1 out of 2. But our best practices mean that you need to use both. So I wouldn't necessarily listen to that, but I would go through it and look at running different asset groups with different goals and different audiences, and even to the point of actually running separate performance max campaigns. They do sometimes work well together in an ad account, although we had a client that was running 8 in an ad account, and that got a bit weird. Wouldn't recommend that. If you want to experiment with your audiences, do you want to experiment with your audiences, Ed? No? Okay, cool. Then do it in separate asset groups and adopt a naming convention so that you're clear on the results that are coming through. Make sure you exclude your brand terms. We'll talk about brand campaigns in a sec. Monitor your Insights tab. So the Insights tab is, for a lot of us, the closest that you can get to actually getting insights on your search terms. And you can then add your converting search terms into your search campaigns so that you can, again, funnel that down towards the lower CPC and the lower CPA. And there are scripts now where we can use Google Ads scripts to pull keyword data and search terms data out of Performance Max. It's just a bit of a lift every time you want to do it, but it's possible. With Performance Max, Google will tell you with search that responsive search ads need high ad strength or else. It's not really the case. In some cases, higher ad strength ads perform better. In some cases, they don't. But with Performance Max, your ad strength does become important to the algorithm. So make sure that you do add in the required number of images, videos, and text lines in the right format. And then keep an eye on what is and isn't performing and pull the ones out that aren't performing. One thing that we like to do is just keep removing them until we've got an ad set which is just the best performing creative, and then we can go through and we can clone that and we can reproduce that. And so you can go into your asset groups, look for the Assets tab, and edit and update the assets that you've got there with low performance. It's not as good as seeing one that's got 0 conversions, but it's as good as we're going to get here. And the other one to remember here is don't forget about your search campaigns. Your search campaigns will compete with your Performance Max campaigns. So make sure that you're optimizing those for the search terms that you've got targeted there. Optimize your ad copy, optimize your landing pages. Don't take your eye off those. They will generally perform better, cheaper, stronger, faster, etc. And then lastly, run multiple Performance Max campaigns if you've got the budget and the volume for it. And then you can set different CPA or ROAS targets for different products. You can run multiple asset groups per campaign. This becomes a really good way of being able to segment out products in e-commerce so that you're targeting different products to different groups of people with different returns. So if you are running an online store, then you're going to use Performance Max because Google is taking away your shopping. You're going to use Performance Max to advertise your product on shopping, target potential customers who are similar to people who've purchased to you, have search for your competitors. That can be a fun one. And also make sure that you optimize your shopping feed because you can't filter your products properly in Performance Max unless you've got the data in Google to be able to do that. So simple things like brand, gender, age, type of product, use, things like that. All right. Yeah, that's good. To brand or not to brand. So I'll finish on one of the most controversial topics that we get and controversial questions that we get here. And it's not, should I get 87 brand tattoos tattooed all over my body? This is what Paul Gordon looks like if you take that delicious shirt off. A brand campaign for revision here is a search campaign that targets terms that reflect your brand. So for us, it might just be Refuel Creative, and it would usually include appropriate variations. Now, the argument here always comes down to, if I rank organically number 1 for my name, why do I need to run branded search? It's a pretty valid question. Thing is, depending on the industry that you're in, and this is a big one in the tourism space in particular, Google place a lot of ads above the first organic position these days. Particularly if you're on a phone or tablet, the first position will be a Google ad, and then there'll be second, third ad, there'll be maps listings, there'll be the map ads, might be hotel ads, they'll find some other way to stuff a few more ads in there, and you just won't see your organic listing. Google ad extensions also give the opportunity that organic search doesn't, like properly customizing your site links, your phone numbers, things like that. In our testing, if you run a decent SEO process and campaign at the same time as you're running your Google ads, you can get about a 20% conversion uplift than running SEO alone. So there'll be some overlap, but overall you'll get a transaction uplift as a result. The other thing is you should pay less per click on your branded terms. Unless your name is very generic, you should pay less for those terms. If you're paying less for those terms, this becomes a relatively cheap activity in the grand scheme of your paid search. So to do this profitably, run a solid set of negative keywords. Second, third time I've mentioned that. Make sure you run a solid set of negative keywords. And terms that your converted customers would use should be removed. Things like track orders, support, things like that. You don't want to pay for that traffic. Get rid of those. Your brand campaign is for new customers, not existing. Make sure you set reasonable KPIs. You should expect a significantly higher return from your brand campaign and set your KPIs accordingly. This also allows you to run a lower daily budget. So you can run some people run less than 10% of what they run on their other campaigns. Brand will rarely need as much budget as a non-brand unless you have a very generic company name. Run a brand negative keyword list so that the other campaigns in your ad account don't have search terms in there for your brand, because that will happen. Google will see to that. And also use your first-party data to make sure that you're excluding your customers from your brand campaign. You might use your first-party data to bring back your win-back campaigns and things like that, but you don't need to use that for your existing customers. They know about you. Now, if you need help implementing these suggestions, feel free to have a chat to me. Ollie's at our booth, and we love going through an ad account and showing you what we can find. But just in summary, before we have time for questions, if maybe, remember that Google support sucks, but it's not always wrong. Do not skip the conversion tracking because you need to know what's happening in your ad account. Broad match keywords are definitely not the enemy. They can be your friend with some basic precautions and steps. Performance max can perform if you test. And finally, you can drive uplifting conversions from running brand campaigns. Okay? And with that, Ed, we got any questions?
I've got lots of questions.
Oh, here we go.
Ryan Jones, everybody. Round of applause. He knows his stuff. And I would 100% be up for a Ryan Jones weekly AI-generated comic strip. Let's do it.
Can we
Sign up the socials.
Okay. You, me, and Paul can collab.
Let's go.
Yeah, all right.
All right, thinking bigger than Google Ads, what is the next big thing in the world of online advertising? What should we be planning for and thinking about in the long term?
Well, I mean, the first thing is, who are your customers and where are they going to be? And think about where your customers are going to be. It's funny that as we discover these next big things, the ad platforms are right there waiting for us. So this morning I saw that Google have added Netflix ads as inventory to DV360. So again, they're going after that volume no matter what.
Someone on Slido asked whether you put effort into Bing as a platform or Bing ads. I know a lot of people have recently moved over to Bing as a search engine away from Google. I know I've done that. Is there a trend of this happening, and what's happening in that space?
There are a lot of Copilot users that have moved over to Bing. I don't have the stats on me for that. I think people often overlook Bing because they forget that there is an audience there. Who works in government? Yeah, okay. Keep your hand up if your computer's permanently stuck on Bing. Yeah. So if you work in government or large corporates, Microsoft love to do deals so that everybody has to use Edge and Bing. So government is probably the biggest use case there. Bing, depending on the vertical that you're in, can work quite well. So we'd encourage you to test it.
What are your thoughts about adding competitor names as keywords or negative keywords?
Oh, man. All right, so last week I would have said, unless you're prepared to commit to it properly, terrible idea. But we just launched a campaign last week that we're getting simply astonishing results from at the moment, like $5 CPA leads in a pretty complicated medical field. So I think it just depends on what you're doing in total. If you just run brand competitor terms, run them to a generic landing page and expect them to convert, they're not going to convert. It's also going to cost you more money. It's going to annoy your competitor. In the US, there's a big case of 1-800-GET-FLOWERS versus one of the other gifting platforms are actually suing each other for the increased ad spend because they've run competitor campaigns. So there's a lot of risks and a lot of things to consider there. Test.
That's the most American thing I've heard all day.
Yeah.
That's great. How do you think AI use and GPT use by consumers for search is impacting search use and in turn Google Ads?
There is some data on that I read recently that said that it was still a relatively minor percentage of people, but I see now that OpenAI are planning on releasing a ChatGPT search engine. I think that will change things a bit. People forget that my parents don't know how to use anything ChatGPT, Gemini, etc. Your parents probably don't. There are a lot of people out in the world that using ChatGPT just becomes too complicated. Also, the fact that you can't rely on the AI at the moment to give you accurate information. There are a few caveats there. So the vast majority of people are going to keep using search engines for a while, but always look at alternatives.
Don't forget, you can submit questions anytime today through Slido. Another one that's come in, have you seen a difference, either positive or negative, with the introduction of data-driven conversion attribution? And do you ever customize the conversions attribution model / window for your campaigns?
This one's keeping me up at night, so can we have a therapy session now, or can this person catch up with me in a break, or...
The question meant nothing to me. It's
okay,
way
cool.
beyond my head.
Yeah.
Don't ask me to elaborate.
Data-driven attribution, in theory, is quite good because it gives us a better idea of where the conversions are and what's working. The problem is that it takes time to process that data. It introduces a delay in the data, and so that means that you're making decisions on incomplete information. Unfortunately, Google have taken away most of our alternatives now, so we're stuck with it. We just have to find ways around it and ways to anticipate it. We have found, we've got ad accounts that it makes a 50% difference to the number of reported conversions. You can report on a period, come back 2 weeks later and find that your conversions are doubled. It's madness. More accurate data, but it's madness in the meantime. So there's a bit to unpack there that we probably don't have time for right now.
And one final question. I know for a lot of smaller businesses especially, Google Ads can often be set and forget. Realistically, how often should people be going in and reviewing their ads, reviewing what's in there? I know my parents' business left it for 5 years.
Yeah, wouldn't recommend that. Maybe like 4.5 years. Look, it depends on the amount that you're spending. I mean, if you're spending 50 to 100,000 a month, you probably need to be in there daily. If you're spending sort of 5 to 50, weekly is probably fine. And if you're spending, there are some small businesses spending sort of 500 or 1,000. You can get away with doing that every 2 or 3 weeks if you need to. It's one of those things that, as an agency, we often see clients, if they've got somebody internal managing their Google Ads, and this is absolutely not a criticism, but the internal person gets pulled in 18 different directions, and Google Ads drops down and down and down the priority list, and then they go a month without touching the ad account. We have a few clients where we just provide them with some coaching, and the coaching call ends up prompting them to actually check the ad account, and if they didn't have that call, they wouldn't have checked it. So if you're not checking it and you're spending a reasonable amount of money, you're not excluding search terms, you're not running your negative keywords, you're just not keeping on top of it, and you're just wasting money in the meantime.
Good stuff. Thank you, Paul. I was going to call you Paul.
I am
Thank you, Ryan.
not Paul, but thank you.
You and Paul have got the collab coming later with the AI
Ready?
comic strip.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.